So Patreon has decided to ban Sargon of Akkad, Milo, and someone I've never heard of called James Alsop. Now, rather than give you my hot take on the decision to ban Sargon, I would encourage you to go and watch his aptly named video, You Cannot Trust Patreon, to get the details on why exactly he was banned and the, in my opinion, very weak and misguided rationale for this decision by Patreon. Basically, Carl's Patreon page has been removed for the most uncharitable, out-of-context interpretation of something he said on someone else's live stream 10 months ago. Anyway, as I said, go watch Carl's video for the full story. Now, you may recall in July last year, Lauren Southern was kicked off Patreon, and at the time I pointed out the problems with their policy on bullying, harassment, and hate speech. Here's a much younger me from last year. Here's Patreon's policy on bullying, harassment, threats, and hate speech. Patreon should feel like a safe place for normal people. Normal people. Yeah, okay. We don't allow bullying or harassment on Patreon. At the same time, we want people to be able to express themselves, be critical, and discuss controversial issues. We recognise that discussing celebrities, media, or other public figures can sometimes involve harsh criticism, and we believe that is an appropriate part of free debate. That said, there is no room on Patreon for hate speech or serious threats of violence. For us, hate speech includes serious attacks on people based on their race, ethnicity, national origin, religion, sex, gender, sexual orientation, age, disability, or serious medical condition. So Patreon has a more lenient stance on criticising celebrities than YouTube does, but they also include the nebulous term hate speech. And as we know by now, one person's hate speech is another person's satire or criticism, or just plain simple disagreement. Hate speech becomes completely subjective. Yes, Patreon qualifies it by saying serious attacks, but what's a serious attack in the age of snowflakery? What if I use Patreon to fund a screening of The Red Pill? There are certain people who think that is a serious threat to people's safety. In this case, the women's. In fact, that was the exact reason given for shutting down the initial screening of The Red Pill at Sydney University earlier this year. And as we know, the burden of proof usually lies with the alleged victim. If I feel it's hate speech, or I feel I'm being threatened, then I am. That's usually how these things work. And so on some level, it's not surprising that Carl has fallen afoul of vague definitions around hate speech. Now, it would be easy to chalk this up to claims of a purge of right-wing, or in Carl's case, anti-social justice channels from Patreon. And that may be the case, but at least initially it wasn't clear whether this was just overreach from a Patreon apparatchik, or it has the nod from on high. But you would think, given Carl's significant subscriber base on Patreon, that Jack Conte would have to have known about it and signed off. And given that it's been a few days since Carl's video appeared, Patreon seems to be sticking to their guns. And thus, Jack Conte would also have been acutely aware that getting rid of Carl would have repercussions. And so perhaps it was a calculation. They knew people would walk from the platform, but it was a price they're willing to pay. But then again, at around this time last year, remember that Patreon came out with a genius idea to help creators keep more of the money from their pledges. And how are they going to do this? Charge the patrons more, which promptly led to a mass exodus of patrons from the platform and had the exact opposite effect of that intended by reducing creators' earnings. And Patreon was forced to do an about-face. So who knows, maybe they are stupid enough to not have thought through the consequences of their actions this time round. Anyway, last time people decided to bail from the platform en masse, I joined many other creators in setting up accounts on Maker Support. And then the payment companies came in and cut them off because they didn't like some of the creators on that platform. So that's always going to be the risk of signing up to a new platform. But fuck it. Patreon has shown themselves on multiple occasions now that they just can't be relied upon to be consistent and deal in good faith. When something's said on a live stream, not even on your own channel, and therefore not even funded by Patreon contributions, is taken out of context and then used to damage your livelihood, then as Carl has said, they cannot be trusted. So as you probably already know by now, Carl and others like Dave Cullen and Tim Pool have set up accounts over at Subscribestar. And that's what I've done as well. Despite the risk that this platform gets shut down, I can't in good conscience continue to use Patreon. And some of my patrons have already let Patreon know exactly how they feel by withdrawing their pledges and leaving some interesting messages for Patreon in their exit surveys. I'm going to keep the Patreon account open for the remainder of the month to give people time to switch over and then shut it down in the new year. So check out my page over at Subscribestar. You'll notice I've added the deep dive as a $2 reward, which I was previously giving away for free. There are a couple of reasons for that. As of yesterday, I'm no longer working at Charter Markets and I can't charge $5 for the deep dive extra because I'm no longer operating under a registered financial services licensee. So that subscription service no longer exists, which to be honest was not particularly popular anyway. So I'm trying to fill a gap in funding, and thus the experiment of giving the deep dive away for free, I'm sorry to say, has come to an end. And I completely understand if you don't want to stump up $2 for it if you were getting it for free, but I also want to offer something for new subscribers as well. So given that I've got a bit more spare time on my hands, I will be making more content, but I won't be going back to the 5 videos a week model. I've realised over the last 6 months that I still enjoy making content, but I have to do it at my own pace, and that means making sure to spend a significant amount of time away from the computer. Anyway, perhaps I'll talk more about my own situation in another video. For now, I just want to leave you with some thoughts from one of my favourite YouTubers, Diana Davidson, who summed up this whole Patreon affair perfectly.
Now, we gave Jack Conte a second chance back when the Lauren Southern situation arose, and that is more than he gave any of his Patreon account holders. No second chances with Patreon. No warning. I've thought about this for the last 3 days, and the more I think about it, the more angry I become. We only hear about the big channels being deleted, but there are obviously many others that we've never even heard about. I have a primary duty with the Lighthouse Project. I need to keep doing the work that my patrons have helped me accomplish. People need my help. That makes it difficult for me to just cut off my Patreon account, and that's not exactly what I'm going to do. The work is more important than me. But like others, I am inspired by the stance being taken by supporters who are leaving the platform of Patreon. We can't just keep saying stop, or we'll say stop again. Jack Conte did not give creators a warning system or a meaningful ability to respond before being deplatformed, and he should live by his own rules. We gave him a second chance over a year ago, and he betrayed our trust. So I've set up another account at Subscribestar. I'll put a link below. That is the service that others have agreed to migrate to. I'm asking my patrons to migrate to the other platform because I'm not interested in hearing Jack Conte's excuses this time. People ask me why I do what I do, and the answer is always the same. I hate liars and frauds. I don't know Jack Conte, but I do know that Patreon lied to us, and it's not okay.